everyone. Welcome to Fireside Chats brought to you by Engaging Cities. I'm your host, Kelly Hickler, the community manager with Engaging Cities, as well as the founder of Cinovation Studio. On each episode of our show, we talk to the people behind the plans and learn how community engagement helped bolster that planning effort. But today we're talking about something a little bit different. We have Carlo Tomaino, the city manager of Signal Hill, California. Hi, Carlo.
Hi, Kelly. Nice to be here.
Yeah, thanks for being on our show today. So we have a little bit different of a focus today, where instead of talking about external engagement with residents and external stakeholders, we're going to talk a little bit more so about internal coordination that needs to happen within a jurisdiction and maybe with some of your partner agencies in order to have a successful initiative. So Carlos here to talk about the wonderful achievement that you have in the city of being the first city in LA County to achieve zero functional homelessness. So what does that mean exactly?
So, what that means is that our homeless population here in Signal Hill it doesn't mean we don't have any homeless people ever, because you're always going to have a population that's moving in or around or through your community. But it means that we have a population that's manageable for our ability to accommodate them and provide services and housing. And so for us right now, it means that we have anywhere from, five to maybe three or two people. And at the moment, I know that we don't have anyone in immediate need of services in Signal Hill.
Wow, that's really impressive. What is the population of Signal Hill?
So the resident population here is just under 12,000. It's about 11,800 people. We're a 2.2 square mile city. And we're also unique in the sense that we're one of two enclave cities in the United States, meaning that we're entirely surrounded by another city. So most cities just border each other, but we're entirely, as a city, surrounded by the city of Long Beach.
Oh, okay. I don't think I knew that. Ah, okay. So every border that you have is with Long
With
Beach.
Long Beach, yeah, we're
Yeah.
entirely surrounded by the city of Long Beach. So we share a lot of the same successes and challenges. And I feel a lot of people that go through our community or shop here or drive through assume that Signal Hill is part of the city of Long Beach, but it's actually its own jurisdiction. We're actually celebrating our 100th anniversary this year.
Oh, wow, cool. Okay. So what are you doing for that? What are the festivities?
We have a number of events planned throughout the year. We had our big celebration just toward the end of April because that was the city's actual birthday. And so we had a full day of community events that were really well attended and successful throughout the day. And it was capped off by a big drone show, which was our first ever drone show in the city. And that was really exciting. And we have a lot of other events planned throughout the year, all the way through December.
Oh, cool. Okay. Drone show. Is that like where it looks like fireworks or something in the sky or like
It
the
It does, yeah. So
oh,
basically, they're drones, right? And there were about 500 of them working in concert to generate different shapes and messages. And it's all coordinated with music and graphics and lasers. It's really interesting.
okay, cool. So before we get really into our conversation, I think it might be good for our listeners to hear maybe a little bit more about you and what your background is and how long have you been the city manager there?
Yeah, so I have, in total, I've got about 17 years in local government. I worked for most of that time, about 13 years working for the city of Lake Forest, which is in South Orange County. And then after that, I went to the city of La Mesa, which is about 9 miles east of downtown San Diego. I worked in that city for about 2.5 years. And one of the major focuses of my work, in addition to economic development, was addressing homelessness in La Mesa, and I created the Homeless Action Plan, the Home Team, which is a homeless engagement, mobile engagement team that works to address calls for service that come to the police department. But instead of sending police officers in La Mesa, they now send the Home Team to address those kinds of issues, which was a huge relief down in La Mesa to the police department, a huge help for
Mhm.
them. And I brought those experiences here in Signal Hill. I've been the city manager in the city ever since January of last year, so about a short time for now. But I've really been focusing my efforts on quality of life, addressing homelessness, as I mentioned, and also economic development and diversifying our city revenues.
Yeah.
So I've had a lot of, I think, experience in a lot of really good areas that have been helpful to the communities that I served.
Yeah, that's wonderful that you bring all that experience with you. So, can you tell us a little bit more about maybe start from the beginning of what was all involved with this effort, or what was the starting point for this?
Well, for me, the starting point really was understanding where the community is and what the most important issues are, and talking to our city council and reviewing our biannual resident survey. It was very apparent that the number one issue in Signal Hill was addressing homelessness and finding a way to work within the constraints of the Boise v. Martin decision, which impacts not just California, but many other states in the West, and identifying a way for us to better coordinate our services so that homelessness as an issue here of concern doesn't become greater. There was one park in particular called Reservoir Park that is in the northerly portion of our city, abutting Long Beach, that when I arrived had about 10 to 12 people just living full time at the park,
Mm,
and living under the shade structures. This was a park that was surrounded by homes on three sides. So it was
mm,
definitely intended to be a community park to serve that neighborhood, but had been over time, I think, taken over by folks that didn't have any other place to go,
mhm,
and found the park to be a good, safe refuge for them, where they felt like they could be safe, they could sleep there. But there were definitely, a lot of concerns from that neighborhood about the activity and the
mhm,
presence
mhm,
of people who were unhoused. And so I knew that I needed to make that an immediate focus of my work here.
mhm,
And what I started to do is to recognize maybe what some of the deficiencies were in our service model. So for instance, the city of Signal Hill doesn't have dedicated staff to homelessness. We have a homeless liaison officer who as a sworn police officer, is out in the community working to address homelessness, but he's also got other duties as a police officer, right, primarily. And then we have a contract through the Gateway Cities COG here
mhm,
in this region that allows us to access service providers like People Assisting the Homeless and others that are nonprofits that work in concert with cities, but those are provided through a more regional partnership. But what I identified fairly quickly was that those regional partnerships were not being coordinated. And so our city was not really receiving what I thought was the appropriate level of service for our community and our needs. And within a month of me being here, I had a meeting with our service providers to introduce myself to them, but also to emphasize how important it is for me to address homelessness and to have a services first model
mhm,
to help engage with people and get them into the right housing for them. And so that became an immediate focus, and we started reorganizing our coordination with the service providers first and foremost. And then the other thing that I noted about our city is that our departments, which is not unlike a lot of other cities, but we were siloed. Even though we're a small city, Public Works was not always talking to planning, not always talking to parks, not always talking to code enforcement and other departments about the things that we needed to do together.
mhm,
And one thing that really struck me was that the homeless liaison officer, who was effectively in charge of coordinating our homeless outreach efforts,
mhm,
felt very, very overwhelmed by the task and thought, maybe there's really not much I can do here, and felt like it was his problem, and maybe his problem only to solve. And what I did in the course of a short time here is I coordinated all of our departments into what we call the neighborhood enhancement team. So the NET team includes my office, the city manager's office, the city attorney's office, public works, planning, code enforcement, parks, and other departments, police as well, to talk about, identify solutions to issues that are quality of life based, that are code enforcement, homelessness included, that we could address together. Because my philosophy in speaking to the police department about homelessness was, well, it isn't your problem. It's our problem. It's everybody's problem. So if we work
Mhm.
together and start having regular meetings about what the issues are and what solutions we might be able to affect and how we can better coordinate and organize our efforts, then it's a huge weight lifted off their shoulders. And it's something
Right.
that we can carry collectively as a team much more effectively because I can put a lot of folks in the room that have great individual expertise and we bring that together and it's a great problem solving group.
Yeah, that is amazing. I have so many thoughts as you're talking about this. So let me back up a little bit. And you had mentioned a court case that, can you say the name of that again?
Yeah, so the court case is Boise v. Martin. So
Okay.
this was a court case that was adjudicated back in 2018, where the district court found that if a city does not have sufficient beds to accommodate its homeless population and that there's no alternative sleeping location, then
Mhm.
simply criminalizing the issue is a violation of the Eighth Amendment.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
and that decision right now is actually being it's being argued at the Supreme Court. We expect that there might be a change in that ruling sometime in June or July, so in the summer of this year.
Okay.
But as it stands now, the Boise versus Martin decision is critically a limiting factor to many cities who are trying to address homelessness because
Yeah.
some cities have taken the position that if you don't have sufficient beds to accommodate every homeless person in your community, then the only alternative is to let people be where they are. And that includes
Mm.
many parks, sidewalks, underpasses, places where you
Uh-huh.
might expect to find people who are unhoused. But
Yes.
my philosophy about that is that doing nothing and being too permissive with respect to homelessness is actually inhumane because what you're doing is you're saying to folks, well, we can't really help you, or perhaps you're not ready to be helped. So the only alternative is for you to live outside and possibly die on the streets. And that's wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. And this approach that you took, I like what you said about this is not any one department's problem. This is not your problem or my problem. This is our problem for us to solve together. That is so critical. That's such a good approach, a necessary approach to achieving things. Do you anticipate, or maybe you already have taken that same approach with any other topics within the city?
And typically I do. My approach has always been, that old adage, a problem shared is a problem halved, right? So I don't know that, I don't have all the answers. No individual in this organization and many others have all the answers, but together we have most of the answers, is
Hmm.
what I recognize. And the reason that we have all of these very high qualified people working in our organization is to bring those ideas and perspectives together. So our neighborhood enhancement team, the NET team, does a really good job of addressing the most prescient community issues, like I said, involving homelessness, involving code enforcement, and a lot of other issues that affect cities, and we deal with it as a team. And
Hmm.
that works really, really well. That addresses probably 70% of the issues that we experience in our city. And then the other related philosophy is that I always encourage departments to share information, to talk to each other outside of the net team setting and create a culture where open communication is expected, right? What I don't like to see are departments thinking that, they can't tell me there's a problem, they can't share, or that, another department won't be working with them in collaboration to address an issue. That's not what we do here.
Hmm.
So the other, part of that is an everyday thing of creating a culture in our organization where we're expected to share information and ask questions and sometimes debate amongst each other about what the best possible outcome is. So it's
Mm.
always ongoing.
Yeah. How often does the net team, I guess that's redundant, net team. But
No, that's
how,
okay. That's how we say it too.
yeah, okay. How often do they meet?
We regularly meet every 2 weeks or every month, but
Okay,
we also just meet as necessary in between. So when there's an
okay.
issue that comes up, we get together and we talk about it before it becomes a bigger issue. Because that's
Mhm.
my other philosophy is let's treat issues when they're manageable so that they don't become unmanageable. And that might be anything from a neighborhood code enforcement case involving hoarding. It could be homelessness. It could be unpermitted sidewalk vending in our city. There was an interesting case that we dealt with as the net team where there was a neighborhood peacock that had been allowed to roam in the neighborhood for a couple of years. No one knew how the peacock ever got there, but we were getting complaints from residents about one house that was feeding and caring for the peacock and allowing it to roam in the middle of the night and wake everybody up. And that was a careful balance of, we don't want to upset this neighborhood, which seems to appreciate the peacock. The peacock even had its own social media page.
No.
Yeah, yeah. But at the same
Can,
time,
can you
yeah,
share that name of its page with us?
I don't think I have it off the top of my head. But if you
Okay.
search Signal Hill Peacock, I'm sure you'll find it. And so the bird was really popular with people online and with some people in the neighborhood. But we also needed to respect the fact that, this is a wild animal. It can't be out there. It could cause injury to others itself. It was making a lot of noise in the middle of the night. But the residents were also reticent to approach the homeowner and say, hey, we want you to stop doing what you're doing. So we
Mhm.
facilitated a solution and we involved a group that actually has a ranch where they take care of the animals and
Mm,
peacocks specifically. And
okay.
so, that was something where code enforcement said, well, I don't know what to do with this.
Yeah.
Right? I
Right.
mean, there's many ways I guess you could address it, but it was an example of, well, we have the city attorney there, so the city attorney can give us their perspective. We have public works, we have other departments, and we can come up with solutions together to what could be a tricky issue, right? And one that's sensitive
Yes.
with the neighborhood. And
Yes.
that ended up being a good resolution.
Yeah, yeah, I love that because then again, okay, it's not code enforcement. It's not all on code enforcement to figure this out. They can bring that to the team and you can figure it out together.
Yes. Yeah. And sometimes, the best solutions, they come from unexpected places. So I said, we involve all of our departments and sometimes it's parks and recreation that has
Yeah.
the best solution to something that was actually a code enforcement issue, right? Because you're coming at it from a very, very different perspective. So it's almost like you're crowdsourcing a solution, right?
Oh,
At the
yeah.
city level.
That's a great way to think about it. And I'm not surprised that the Parks and Rec folks have the most creative solutions. Those are usually a fun bunch of people.
They are, but what's interesting is they also don't get enough credit for being creative and smart
Yeah.
and just well-rounded, right? I think a lot of folks assume, well, they're putting on the great community events and those kinds of things that are visible and
Hmm.
fun for everybody, but they do a lot of work in the background where, they are every day working with populations, little kids, infants, right?
Yeah.
Seniors,
Right.
right?
Hmm.
Folks with
Hmm.
special needs. And,
Hmm.
and that's a really tough job. And I give them a lot of credit for being able to work effectively with all those different groups, which
Hmm.
is why I'm not entirely surprised they would sometimes come up with the best solutions to these issues.
Hmm. That's a really good point. So, going back to the zero functional homelessness initiative, other than forming the net team and having success with that approach, is there anything else that you think really stands out that went really well with how you approached this?
Well, I would say that the other thing that went really well is, with the net team, we don't just talk about, well, homelessness is an issue and where is it an issue and what are we doing, but we have our homeless liaison coordinator who's funded through the county program attend each of those meetings,
Mhm.
and we go over individual cases, individual
Mm.
people, And as a team, we talk about, let's say Mark, and Mark's been chronically homeless for 10 years. He's been around in the area. We know where he is on a regular basis. And we talk about creating a specific service model and program that works for Mark. Because
Hmm.
maybe the issue with Mark is, well, he doesn't want to accept services at a shelter because he's got a pet, right? Or he's got another issue, an obstacle that precludes him from immediately accepting services. So that's something that we really talk about in detail at the net meetings, are individual people and how they're doing and what they're focused on, and how we can create an outreach model that
Mhm.
respects their wishes, but then ultimately gets them housed, right? And so that takes a lot of time and
Mhm.
additional effort, but it's important to do and understand. And as I said, the other, I think, really successful thing is that we were able to get, as a result of those conversations in the net team, our regional homeless outreach and service providers saying, okay, well, then we need to find a specific type of housing for Mark that allows for him to bring his dog, et cetera, et cetera. So we'd been doing a really good job of reducing our homeless population just through that effort. But then what also happened that was very fortunate for us is that the county introduced a new program called Pathway Home. And it's similar to a program that the state started where they were purchasing motels and hotels and renovating them, but it's
Mhm.
county run. And it's a wraparound services program where the county rents rooms from certain motels, and they provide all the wraparound services. And that ended up being a very low barrier housing solution that was well tailored to our homeless population. But even in advance of that, I'm really proud of the fact that because we had done so much outreach and gotten to know all of our homeless residents so well,
Yeah.
we were able to get them, when that program became available to us, get them document ready within a matter of weeks
Mm.
to be
Wow.
eligible for the program, because we had such a deep understanding of what their individual needs were and
Yeah.
where they were in terms of receiving services, that
Mhm.
we were able to get them ready for housing very, very quickly. And again, the solution provided by the county through Pathway Home was great because it applied to basically 95% of our service population in Signal Hill. So it was
Mhm.
a program that had more flexible um, requirements and regulations that accommodated their needs. They could accommodate folks that were couples. They could accommodate folks with pets. They could accommodate individuals with special needs. So that
Mhm.
was another key component, is that we were able to connect with this county program that allowed us to more to accelerate the help that we were already providing to people in Signal Hill.
Wow, that is so cool to hear about. Was there anything that didn't quite go as you had hoped, or any unexpected issues that came up, or anything that you might do differently?
I would say the approach we took is still the approach I would take. But what happened, especially initially, is in working in Reservoir Park, where I mentioned there were 10 to 12 people permanently living at the park. You
Mm-hmm.
know, we had, I think, this expectation that, once we had coordinated our services, that people would immediately be open to housing of some kind, whether it was transitional or it was a shelter or it was more permanent. But what we learned is every case is different. And there were people who were willing to accept services, and then there were people for different reasons that were not ready to transition into housing. And so we had to keep adjusting our approach at Reservoir Park specifically. And that took time. That took a lot more time than I thought would
Mm-hmm.
initially. And the other thing that was happening is we were getting complaints from the neighborhood, um, practically every day about the condition at the park. And so that was frustrating for them, as it was for us, because we wanted to try to address this issue more quickly.
Yeah.
But what we learned through the process is that not everyone's in the same spot, not everyone's in the same place, and not everyone's ready to accept services. And sometimes you need to change the physical conditions at the park to encourage people to accept housing. And what I mean by that is that there was a park shelter that was being used, as housing, right? That's not what that was intended for. That was intended for the residents and others to rent and use for their birthday parties, their celebrations, their gatherings. And so we restricted the use of that park shelter to make it a little bit more difficult to be out there at the park so that it wasn't, an immediately, inviting condition, right? So it's a little bit of tough love to say, look, we want you to be housed. That is our first and foremost priority, is that you be housed and you have services. At the same time, I cannot create a condition at a park where we make it too easy
Mm,
to live out here, right? So it's a little bit of friction that you need to create, hopefully to push people, or in a gentle way, to the outcome of saying, well, maybe I am better off being housed. Because if you make it exceedingly easy to be unhoused and you provide an unintended shelter condition at what's intended to be a public park,
yeah,
yeah, I mean, you're going to have more prolonged homelessness. So we had to adjust our approaches to make sure that that wasn't as inviting a
that's,
condition as it was when I first got here. And then hopefully, and they did, and people saw the benefit of, yeah, maybe I do want to be indoors.
I see. Can you share, I don't know, maybe you already said the number of individuals that you were able to get into housing?
Absolutely. So overall, including our nighttime population, which is not something that cities always account for when they think about homelessness, I would say we at our height, we probably had 55 to 60 people in this community, right? Through the net team, in about 8 or 9 months, we were able to house 10 people on a permanent basis. So we had reduced our population to about 45 people. And
Mhm.
then through the Pathway Home program, we were able to house the remaining 45 people.
Oh, wow.
So the day that we housed the remaining 45 people through the Pathway Home program, we officially had zero homeless residents in our community.
Yeah. Oh, that's amazing. Are there takeaways or words of advice or, nuggets of wisdom that you can share with other communities that they might be able to implement? And I'm just thinking, and you probably heard this, I'm guessing maybe you face some criticism of, well, yeah, you can do that there in your city because you have a small population and you have a smaller homeless population. How could we possibly do that in our city? But what is your response to that? What would you say to another city who is struggling with some of the same issues, no matter what size they are?
Mhm. Well, I would say that, for cities, especially our neighbor, right, and other cities in the region that have significantly larger homeless populations, I would say, yeah, you're probably right. You may not be able to get to zero functional homelessness because the issue is much larger, because the resources are limited for all the reasons that you already know. So you might be entirely correct about that, but you've got to be persistent and you can't give up. So, I mean, even though our population was relatively smaller than our neighbor, it's a larger population for a city our size. But perseverance is really key, right? So once you've organized your resources and you've shared the problem among a larger group of people, and not just siloed homelessness to one or two people and say, hey, you guys figure it out. You
Mhm,
made it everybody's problem to help solve. You've made it a priority as the
mhm,
leader of the organization for everybody. Once you've done that, you've got to be persistent. It's like anything else we do in local government. We do not have, in most instances, the ultimate panacea, the solution to this issue. It is exceedingly rare to be able to have a concrete and absolute resolution to an issue because we deal with, mostly outside of, regular duties, maintenance,
mhm.
infrastructure, et cetera, we
Right.
deal with unsolvable societal issues at the ground level. And that's okay. Sometimes all you can do is chip away at something, right? And you don't lose hope and you continue to persevere because at the end of the day, that's what the residents expect you to do. The residents won't have a solution to this issue. They don't have the resources, but they pay taxes and they expect and rely on the local leaders to help either, resolve or at least mitigate the issue, right, to the best of their ability. So we have, I think, a professional and moral and ethical obligation to chip away at this issue in whatever way is best for our own communities.
Wow, that's so well said. And this made me think of more. existential type questions about the function of local government, but that's a different episode, maybe a different podcast. So, Carla, what is a good way for people to either get in touch with you or someone else at the city if they wanted to get more information or follow up with further questions?
Oh, sure. My contact information is listed on the city website. So we're cityofsignalhill.org. And then I'll give you my email. My email is ctom as in Michael, AINO at cityofsignalhill.org. And I'm more than happy to chat with anyone about this issue or just give you my 2 cents on what you might be able to do to better coordinate efforts in your own city.
Yeah, well, thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today. It was very insightful. And it, like I said, it brought up more questions for me, maybe more interesting topics to tackle in a future episode. But thanks again for talking with us. And thank you to all our listeners for tuning in. Remember to head on over to engagingcities.org where you can find additional episodes and other helpful resources related to community engagement. We'll see you guys next time. Bye.